Moms for Liberty really worked miracles.
We have a crisis in America in public education. This is the future of our kids and our country.
You are joyful warriors.
And we are just getting started. Good morning and welcome to the Fire of Liberty show. I'm Tina Deskovich, CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty. This show is a show that brings you the warriors from the front lines of this culture war, mostly our chapter chairs that are out fighting for the children in our country, fighting to make education better. And we have a great show planned for you today. We have breaking news yesterday from RFK Jr. out of the Department of HHS. We have a big discussion on Title IX, and our guest is from I'm not going to call it the great state of Illinois. I'm going to call it the state of Illinois. I'm not sure what you guys call it there. She is from the suburbs of Chicago. She's the chapter chair of our Lake County, Illinois chapter. And welcome, Marsha McClary from Chicago. Can I say you're from Chicago, or is that a misnomer?
I'm from the northwest suburbs, Barrington area, which is about a half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on traffic, out of Chicago. So.
And you grew up there, yes?
I did.
Yes. And tell me, I grew up in a lot of different places, but I moved here in middle school. So I grew up in Florida, in a little beach town, sleepy town. What's it like growing up outside Chicago?
Sure. Midwestern feel, and I am kind of out in the suburbs, so it's not super busy, but we go to the city quite a bit as well. It's a lot of fun to get down to the city. Being close to a big airport is always helpful too. To be able to get out. But it has changed a lot. So when I grew up there, we built a house out, 45 minutes out of Chicago, and it was pretty quiet and pretty, there wasn't a lot of there, you'd have like 5 or 10 acres before another house. And then now it's really built up.
Yeah. That doesn't sound really suburban to me. That sounds kind of rural.
Now it's a lot more congested, but.
And, what were the politics like? Not that a child understands that, but
Sure.
Do you feel like it was a conservative area in the suburbs, or?
It definitely was. And it has changed. It was definitely a lot more conservative. Now, the city of Chicago, as far as I remember, had been fairly blue, even when I was little, if you look at the data. But now it's come out of the city.
If you go back to the 1920s and New York City and Chicago, the crime rings, the mafia, the things that were going on in the cities. So It's always been kind of crazy there, I'd say. But the suburbs, beautiful, pretty decent childhood. We've got some moms that have come on here with some crazy stories growing up, but you just kind of had a normal life for the most part. All good. That's wonderful. It's great. So we're going to talk a little bit today about your background, though, your professional background, because it ties into some of the breaking news that's happening right now in our country. So what's your background? Talk about you, your family a little bit, your career, what that's looked like, hobbies, anything like that.
Sure. So I have 5 children from ages 11 to 20. So a breadth of experience in terms of schools and things like that. I did grow up in Chicago. I went to a Catholic grade school and then public high school. I remember my parents even, having me really make the decision of what I was going to do for high school. And I chose, for various reasons, there was a lot more in terms of different types of classes and things at the public school and the private school was a good 30-minute drive. So made the decision to go to public school, and I did have a great experience. I was also a figure skater growing up, and I was on a precision team, and we actually competed at nationals. It was a lot of fun. And now precision team skating is a more prominent sport. It was a lot of fun. It's like a recounts on ice type of thing.
Oh, wow.
I did play piano as well, and got pretty far along with that. So
you are very cultured, I would say. I didn't know, you didn't tell me that in advance.
Yeah.
That you were a precision, what is it called? Precision
team skater. So it's basically, like recounts on ice. And you have a big team, and that gave it a social element, because a lot of figure skaters are solo, but I got to do the social aspect, which I really enjoyed.
So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. We've not discussed this. I don't know anything. I know nothing about ice skating, or I went actually last year to Central Park in New York City and rented skates. Fun. And, that's my extent of skating. Yeah. So I know nothing about, I guess is it considered a sport, the precision? It's like gymnastics in the sense of, and so you were on a team. biggest takeaway, learning experience of working with other individuals that closely? Because I have a feeling that that's helped you throughout your life, and probably even with being a Moms for Liberty chapter chair, working with other people, just a guess.
Sure. It's really important that people show up to practice and are committed, because you have to be in sync. So that was very important. We'd all have training, and we'd get up at 6 a.m. and go out there, and it's a big commitment. Because without the team, it's a lot different. Even solo skating, if you miss a practice, no big deal. If you miss the team practice, it's a big deal.
And so there's competitions. You said you went to the national level competing. And so you, I think that's going to play into our conversation with some of the things in Title IX that are happening that are coming forward, because you understand what it's like to get up at 6 a.m. and prepare and fight and struggle to win a title, to be the best in your sport. So we're going to see how this plays out in this conversation. So you were a precision skater. You played the piano. You still play the piano?
Occasionally. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And my daughter's playing a bit now too.
Maybe you could do a performance summit. I don't know. Can we drag a piano out? That'd be fun.
Let's see.
Okay. And your professional career, your higher education background?
Sure. Yeah. I went to, then I graduated from high school, went to Indiana University, and I got my undergrad in accounting and computer information systems. And at that time, computer information systems was pretty early. We had just started getting internet and all these things. So it was super fun time to do that. And then I worked for a while, and I went back and got my master's and MBA from Kellogg in marketing and strategy, to kind of round it out and make it a softer piece of my background, since I had so much technical experience. Worked in the high tech industry, as well as then pharmaceuticals, almost 20 years up to 2019, which is a really interesting time to be, exiting that industry. But I got a graceful exit. Our company was moving its headquarters to Boston, and I live in Chicago, and I just wasn't going to uproot my family. They offered me super great places to move to, but like Singapore, they were like, you could go to Boston, Singapore, Tokyo. I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, I really think I'm going to do something different.
I really just love Chicago and want to stay here. No.
Yeah. Well, I do. And I have a lot of family there. I have a lot of ties to Chicago, and, my area outside the city a little bit is very nice, actually. And it's got a lot of rolling hills and trees.
It's your home.
It's nice. Yeah.
It's your home. And so pharmaceuticals, I hear that with all the news that's happening nowadays, and I think, oh, you were part of big pharma. Can you help explain that a little bit? What did you do in pharmaceuticals? And when people say big pharma, is that what you were doing necessarily, or is that something different?
Yeah, so it was big pharma. And so the way my journey there started was our company was a Japanese company that was starting up an affiliate in the United States for the first time. They had done partnerships, but they did not have their own presence in the United States. So in the Chicago area, they were starting an office, and I had worked in some startup type of environments, and I thought this is really up my alley at the time. And I was exiting the high tech industry, which was not going well in Chicago. So I was like, I need to find a new industry. But my specialty was more financial and strategic planning. So I went into pharma from that angle. And then I got such a great experience there in terms of my skills, got to do a lot of different like geographic expansion, M&A work, portfolio management, which the portfolio management is really where I saw some things and a lot of data that gave me insights into what's happening today.
Slow down for 1 second, because M&A work, most people listening have no idea what that means. And portfolio management, no idea what that means. So if you could expand just a little bit more on some of this work. I think it's important to talk about this because it's part of your passion and it ties into breaking news from yesterday. So
sure. So M&A is mergers and acquisitions, and portfolio is so portfolio management in a company usually means that you're evaluating investments and opportunities to see what kind of fit they have for the company or for the investors, depending on who your stakeholders are. So in terms of pharmaceuticals, it would be, does it fit the company's strategy? Is it going to be, good for the investor?
So you were actually helping build big pharma. You're helping them merge and acquire other companies to become bigger pharma? Not criticizing, I'm trying to understand
Yes.
how this works exactly.
Yes, that's part of the job. And
Okay.
I had worked in my BA at Kellogg. I had done some classes and some specific work on that, and I found it very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And I had a fair number of mentors that had done some work in that area. So it gave me a lot of insights into the industry. And I'd also done alliance management and saw a lot of clinical trials and things we were doing with partners, and that had been prior to the portfolio experience, that showed, and I will say that's where it got kind of uncomfortable. There's a few areas of my experience that got kind of uncomfortable.
And is this, so you did it for 20 years, I think you said?
Almost 20 years.
So is this now moving towards 2019 that this is, it's so, so crazy that that's like your light bulbs are going off. A lot of moms that sit in this chair and we talk to, light bulbs start going off with an assignment that comes home, but you're actually in your job, you're starting to see things that you're like, what? What's like, And so that what you're seeing, you tell me what you're seeing, but it sounds like maybe you're seeing some data points, some interesting studies, maybe that are making you question. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So there were a few angles. So one was, the FDA requires when you approve a drug that there have to be studies in children most of the time, not always, but most of the time. And that's not a pharma requirement necessarily. It's an FDA requirement because they want to prove that if a child takes it, it's safe. Or if a doctor prescribes it off-label, and off-label means physicians, especially in the United States, have the ability to prescribe something that they think might be good for you, even if it's not approved for that specific situation. So the FDA wants it to be safe for children. So that, and like a lot of things, it's well-intentioned thought, but when you actually see how the trials are performed and you think, okay, so I'm putting something in a child and I don't know for sure if it's going to be safe. Sure, they try to make sure it's safe for adults, but then getting it right, the dose and different things for children. I mean, it's ethically a difficult thing for me to think about putting something in a child and you don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, and I'm talking about something that, like, if it's a life-saving cancer treatment, that's one thing. The family's like, I'll do anything.
Right.
Please put this in my child to save them, whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is something that would be, let's just say, without naming specific studies, something that would be a common medication for adults for something. And then you're saying, okay, I'm going to put it in 14, 12, and then you go down the line, kids, to make sure it's safe for them. And that's where I'm like, it just feels uncomfortable to me.
So this is, just to be clear to everybody, this is before COVID. Because
this is way back. This is probably 2014, 15. I started getting more exposure to these things. And I kind of, it's different if you know what's happening. But then if you're in meetings on a weekly basis or more, and you're talking about how to enroll children into these studies that don't have the disease at hand, it's just for really safety, you're like, and then it's, how do we get more kids in these studies? And how do we, but the FDA is making pharma do it. So, I can't really blame pharma on that angle, so it's
a tangled web of, but you were starting, the light bulbs were going off and you were feeling uncomfortable. Which makes complete sense. And normal people like me, not that you're not normal, but people that haven't had experience in that industry or field at all have no idea. Like, so many people, especially before 2020, trusted your doctor, trusted your pharmacist, trusted CVS pharmacist, that when they put up, you should get 12 vaccines when you come in to pick up your prescription. You see people lined up to go sit down, and we don't think twice. We just think, oh, the people that know have taken all the proper steps. And I think that's changed in America, I would say. But you were before your time.
Yeah, I mean, and the whole vaccine thing, interestingly, I worked in portfolio management, and my company had vaccines in their portfolio. So I knew enough.
So portfolio management, explain what portfolio, like investment portfolio, is that what you mean by that?
Yes. So for a pharmaceutical company, they would have a series of different types of drugs or vaccines or some, medical devices, whatever. And our portfolio, you would have to analyze to see, should we continue with some of these things? How much is it going to cost? I mean, and it would all feed into the annual planning process or long range planning process for that
So
matter.
is this vaccine, is this medication profitable for our company?
Mm-hmm.
And are we going to continue with it? Which is understandable. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
pharmaceutical companies have to make a profit. They have to pay their employees. We
Exactly.
understand that. But you had an up close bird's eye view of that. And so,
correct.
I don't like to read things on the show because I think reading is kind of boring, but breaking news yesterday, RFK guts CDC vaccine panel, quote unquote, retiring all 17 members. On his X account, he said, the most outrageous example of their malevolent malpractice has been its stubborn unwillingness to demand adequate safety trials before recommending new vaccines for our children. Today, a compliant American child receives between 69 and 92 routine vaccines from conception to 18 years old. This is up. I don't know what year you were born. So do I say my age on here? I was going to say, I was born in 1974. I won't say my age. This is in 1986. Kids got 11 vaccines in those 18 years. And RFK is saying on his X account yesterday, kids are getting between 69 and 92 vaccines. The committee has recommended each of these additional jabs without requiring placebo-controlled trials for any of them. This means no one can scientifically ascertain whether these products are averting more problems than they are causing. And then from a Daily Wire article, the committee has never recommended against a vaccine it's been asked to advise on. Never, not once. So we've got this committee basically rubber stamping any vaccine that's been brought to them. And then he just said that they haven't done the proper testing on these vaccines. And so the committee's been rubber stamping them. They have never recommended against them. Even vaccines that were later withdrawn for safety reasons. It has failed to scrutinize vaccine products given to babies and pregnant women. And so, did you see that yesterday when that broke?
Absolutely.
And, as someone that's been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, I don't know, if you're 40 years, that would make you really kind of much older, 30 years, long, but 20 years, but you've been, 25 years, heavily involved in it. Following it closely, seen it bird's eye view, had bad feelings for the last 10 years. What were your thoughts yesterday when that breaking news happened?
So I was relieved that things are starting to change because I agree that the vaccines don't have placebo-controlled trials, and we don't even have good solid outcomes data. I mean, there have been a lot of physicians that have looked at, hey, here's my kids in my practice that haven't been vaccinated versus those that have, but that data is sort of, it's not super well organized and it's not well published. And I really want to see that. And I think that right now we have a law that says the vaccines or the pharma companies can't be liable for vaccine injuries. And that's a problem. It really is. And that's something I know that RFK also wants to change. And the thing that really bothered me the most about all this is doing the portfolio management. One of the things we looked at is the failure rate and the success rate of things at various stages of development. And when we launched, like, for example, the COVID vaccine, most of those would have failed, statistically, not knowing any data. They would have failed at that stage of development, even if it was something minor, like, the dose was a little high or low, or something was, whatever, or the plant we produced it in had some issue. These things happen. And for us to say, we're going to go and put this in all these kids' arms tomorrow, it was absolutely ridiculous to me. Absolutely crazy. And that was really a defining moment. Yeah.
So when did you go from seeing concerning documents, having some concerning thoughts in your position? Obviously you left the company when they moved to another city, another state. But where did you go from just being a kind of an observer and bystander to an activist? Because, you're a chapter chair of Moms for Liberty. So you are one of the most effective activists in the United States of America, undeniably, if you ask me. And so how did you get there? And was this your issue that really got you fired up?
Yeah. Well, so yes and no. So I had this knowledge, going out of when I left pharma in 2019. And I'd actually, from a business perspective, I pivoted and I started a financial planning firm to help people with their money.
So you think you're just okay, I had
right,
some concerns. I don't really like where that's going. I'm going to choose a new career path. Probably never going to have to think again about vaccines and the things you were working on. And that's ironically 2019.
Yeah, it was ironic. And I'm a Christian, so I don't believe it was ironic. I believe this was all planned. So yeah, we get into 2020 and I became activated more on the educational side because of just what was going on with our schools. And in Illinois, we were locked down pretty hard. The kids were really struggling. My son, who was in 7th grade at the time, was exponentially struggling. And so that was the activating moment. And the vaccines came soon after, because it was the closures. And then it was your kids can go back to school if they're vaccinated, or they can, not wear their mask if they're vaccinated.
And now your two worlds are merging.
Right. Exactly. And that was like, wow, this is not by accident. I've got to speak up. So, and it was very urgent. When it was the vaccines, it was urgent because I thought the more kids I can save by speaking up, the better. I don't care who likes me. I don't.
So did Illinois, did they have a standard policy or they pass a law that your children had to be vaccinated with the COVID vaccine before they could go back to school, or your district did that? Do you know?
No. So it was sort of spotty. So different counties did different things. For example, like Cook County, which is, I literally live right on the border of Lake and Cook County, and Cook County is where Chicago is. So no surprise, Cook County took a hard stance, and you had to show a vaccine card at restaurants. You're supposed to show a vaccine card to go to the gym or go to a theater or something like this. And Lake County across the street didn't have that, which was really interesting. So that was on the like the going, schools were a little different. So the schools, they were going to have you could still go to school if you weren't vaccinated, but you were going to have different restrictions on it. And then they were having clinics in the schools and advertising all over the place. And so me and this other
clinics to get vaccinated at the schools?
In the schools.
Okay.
In which I was like, wow, I cannot believe this is happening. I mean, they didn't even have the package inserts to show you what the safety data was in the vaccine. Not that anyone reads it, but I mean, it was so egregious. It was. So I went to school board meetings, started writing emails and all the stuff. And I was so activated because it was extremely urgent.
Hold on, back up. You went to school board meetings.
Yeah.
So is this the first time you go to school board meetings?
Well, no, because we went to school board meetings to get the schools open, and this was before the vaccine was available.
Okay.
So in the summer of the journey was really in the summer of 2020 in Illinois. A lot of schools, and ours, to their credit, they were trying to open.
Chicago wasn't. I remember the Chicago Teachers Union. Weren't they the ones that were in the islands? Was that the city where the teachers? Do you remember that?
Yes.
They were like putting videos online. The teachers literally laying out in their bikinis.
There was definitely a few situations,
and the schools were still closed.
Yeah,
they were supposed to be teaching online, but they were doing it from the Bahamas or wherever. Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah, that was not in my district, but in Chicago, in a few places there was some stuff like that going on. But out by us, there were a lot of schools that were not, close out more from the city trying to open. And the state had these very, increasingly stringent regulations as like July started going on. It was like, okay, now you have to eat lunch 6 feet apart. And then, you have to, it just got to the point where these schools couldn't figure it out. So they had to stay closed. They couldn't follow the law. I will say that there were a lot of schools in southern and mid-state Illinois that, made it work. Okay, let's just say. But by Chicago, there was too much scrutiny. So they closed, and our community got very active. And because I was I follow a lot of data, you could tell the kids were okay. The data already show you that the kids they would just recover fine from COVID. So we were like, this is pretty problematic. Why are we locking these kids down?
So you took your experience though and went to school board meetings and spoke about the vaccine on children.
Correct.
Did your school board listen?
So I believe they listened.
Oh, good.
I don't
That's
know
great news.
Well, so they did have, I believe it was one clinic, and they did a little bit of ads, and then they stopped. Because, but I believe he made a difference, because a lot of schools near Chicago and closer to the city were doing a lot for months and months and months, and ours did not. So I do believe it made a difference.
Yeah. And I'll just go ahead and chime in here, because I know of a very specific story that I was privy to during that time. And I know of other stories through hearsay that the same thing had happened. A lot of schools were giving flu shots. They couldn't quite get the COVID vaccine in, because you remember it was like unrolled in waves for people, and children weren't the first ones to get it. But early on, they wanted to make sure that kids could get the flu shot so that they could differentiate if it's the flu or COVID, and make sure at least, that was the reasoning. And there were times that children got the flu shot without parental consent. That was very concerning to me back then. And it's because they bring these clinics into schools. And guess what? Schools can't even teach kids to read. They cannot manage properly medical procedures like that, making sure all the forms are correct. It's going to happen when you bring the clinics into schools. I don't even know what to say there. It was the one experience that I know, I'd say firsthand from the parent, is the child was actually in high school. It wasn't even a small child that wouldn't know what was going on, but it was a nonverbal autistic child. And so the child had the same first name as the child that did have authorization, and they grabbed the wrong child. And can you imagine, as a parent, knowing, what if you are an anti-vaxxer? You have a right to be an anti-vaxxer. What if you are? The mother was gracious and kind and to the district, but that could have been a disaster, and it's not okay. And so get those clinics out of schools. That is something we've learned from that period. So you go to your school district, you think they listen, they end up taking the one clinic you say out. That's wonderful. So
yeah, and they had one and then none after that. So
that's good. So you were effective.
I believe so.
Yeah,
I like
great.
It. I mean, to me, it doesn't even matter as much as the fact that it stopped. If there was 20 other people writing emails, I didn't know about it. Maybe it could. I mean, to me, it just matters.
Hey, take credit.
An outcome.
Take some credit.
I'll take credit. It's a win.
It's a win.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about wins in Illinois and some insanity in Illinois. Illinois has some of the craziest laws on the books that are impacting children and happening in schools. Tampons in boys' bathrooms and all types of things. But first, we're going to take a 1-minute break and hear from our sponsors today, Patriot Mobile.
In 2025, we find ourselves in a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage on all 3 of the major networks, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service, it's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
We are grateful for Patriot Mobile. They are good friends and partners to Moms for Liberty. And if you subscribe today and go to patriotmobile.com/M4L and subscribe, you will help support Moms for Liberty too. So we hope you'll consider switching your phone lines, your whole family, all the accounts to Patriot Mobile. They are a good organization doing good work, and they use their profits to benefit organizations like Moms for Liberty. And so they sponsor our summit every year. Marsha, have you been to Summit before?
I have. I have been to 3 summits. They're fantastic. I recommend.
Wait, 22, 23. It's all 3. You've been to all 3?
I've been to all 3 summits.
What's your favorite one?
And well, last year was my favorite for various reasons.
Why?
Well, my daughter came and she had a fantastic time with the kids group.
Oh, how old is she?
And she's 11.
We do Liberty Kids, and that is way fun. They have a good time in there, and then they do a performance for all of us, usually on the last day, which is also fun.
Yeah. And it was fun to visit DC and to, just go around. And I just, now that I know more people too, it was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
You come in this year?
Definitely. Yeah.
October 16th through the 18th.
Yeah.
It's in Orlando, Florida. momsforliberty.org/summit 25. We hope you'll join us. Tickets are on sale now. So we're going to get back into this conversation of what's going on. We've got Marsha McClary here. She's the chapter chair of Lake County, Illinois, Moms for Liberty. I'm Tina Deskovich, CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty. And we are going to talk about the insanity in Illinois. There's some alliteration with the insanity in Illinois.
There is a little bit.
Because your fight has gone from COVID vaccine on children, which thank goodness we've got RFK now taking care of that, to it's Pride Month. It's Pride Month all across the country.
Yeah.
And in Illinois, it means something even more than it does in the rest of the country. Everywhere you go right now, it's just in DC. Every hotel check-in stand has pride flags. It's, it's everywhere. And, adults do what you want, but we're going to talk about how this is impacting children in Illinois and what they're doing in Illinois to celebrate Pride Month. We're going to talk about Title IX and some of the other things going on in Illinois. So let's start with Illinois Pride Month. I was on your X account recently and saw that you shared, I can't remember the name of the school district or the name of the school, but they had 4-year-olds celebrating Pride Month in Illinois. And how are they doing that?
Yeah. Well, they're talking about pronouns and they're reading a lot of books and things that are, displaying different types of gender and, gender ideology.
Yeah. It was somebody's
is
4-year-old
this
son
is showing up.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody's 4-year-old son, though, you had shared their story. Their 4-year-old son came home from school with a sticker that said, "My pronouns are he, him." I mean, all I got to say is, thank goodness that he didn't come up with a sticker that said, "My pronouns are she, her" at 4.
Or Zizar.
Zizar. I don't even know. There's 47 or 97. I can't remember. And so they're teaching 4-year-olds during Pride Month. And I saw the printout there. They had each day they were celebrating something. And in this child's elementary school, he's 4 again. He must be an early kindergartner. Maybe they have VPK or pre-K there. On Tuesday, so Monday was pronoun day. Tuesday was trans day of awareness for 4-year-olds. And so what do you think about that, Marsha?
It really bothers me. I mean, adults do what you want, but these kids, being, telling them they might not be born in the right body and that they should physically change it is basically what that's about, is so wrong to me. And it's going on. And a lot of it comes from, we have a state law called the Illinois Human Rights Act. And our Illinois State Board of Education came up with strong guidance, which most of the schools are following, about teaching kids this type of thing and holding up rules about pronoun use and those kind of things. And
when was that passed? So the Illinois Human Rights Act?
It's been around a long time, but it has evolved. Yeah, I don't know the exact
So they
date,
probably between 2018 and now they added gender identity in there, which then would pick up all of these other issues.
It could have been even before that, but yeah.
That makes complete sense. Okay, so there are, we were talking about earlier, just insane laws happening, passing, getting signed into law in Illinois. And let's start with the tampon law.
Sure. So now there is a law that says in grades 4 through 12, they need to have tampons in the boys' bathroom.
So
free.
How old are 4th graders?
Or sanitary, I think the code is sanitary materials, which is, basically.
So boys' bathrooms for 4th graders. So
10
10-year-old boy, 11-year-old, what's a 4th grader?
A 10-year-old.
A 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So a 10-year-old boy may need a sanitary napkin or a tampon.
Correct.
And so how does something like this get passed? How does this pass a House and a Senate and get signed by a governor?
Well, prior to that, we had the Illinois human rights changes, and this was an output of that, so that, if
equal rights. So if a woman has access to materials to help her with her period, a boy should also have access. Is that
this is
fair
this
access?
Is obviously, this is obviously a female who now has changed the gender identity to a male. So this person wants to go into the boys' facilities. So this person
Ah.
needs access to, tampons or, pads in the boys' locker room or the boys' bathroom. Yeah.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I know this is true because, the dads will tell us they're in there and send in photos and everything. And my husband's told me many times, he's like, yep, they're in there.
So a 10-year-old boy, I have 2 boys. I remember when they were 10. I mean,
Yeah.
when they were 6 or 7, they were still like making fart noises with their hands and laughing. And so 7,
Absolutely.
8, 9, 10, 3
For
more years,
sure.
they're now
Yeah.
10.
Mhm.
I imagine these things are getting filled with water and stuck on the ceiling and the wall. Like do you know any of that
I've heard
happening?
a lot of stories. Yeah, and one particular story, I know that they flushed a bunch down the toilet and flooded the bathroom.
Yeah.
And
Just giving
so
them
the
things to-
principal yanked the stuff out because he's like, I don't know what to do with this, and he's a nice guy, and he's like, I don't want to get in trouble with anybody, and I don't want my bathroom flooded. So yeah, he's like, we'll just take the stuff out and then leave the machine there.
Ooh. So wait. They took them out and left the machine. Maybe the
Yeah.
state law is reads that the machine has to be in there, or he feels like he's
Yeah.
complying.
You just can't
and
win,
so-
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Boys will be boys sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Insane law. Okay.
Mhm.
Insane law number 1.
Yeah, that's one.
Insane law number 2.
Yeah. So we have several. So
Just
the
pick-
next one
just
would
pick
be
one.
sure. Yeah. So now we have a law that says you cannot remove, even if they're obscene or adult content, from school libraries. We're not talking about public libraries, school libraries. So if something is acquired, they can't remove it anymore.
No matter what.
So,
There's
so it's tied to, we can pull funding. So yeah, you can remove it, but then you could risk being reported and lose your funding, which no school board member wants to, get themselves into that situation.
because the state funds the schools. I mean, that's how it
Mhm.
is here in Florida,
Right.
at least. That
Right.
they take all of the
Mhm.
tax money from the
Mhm.
counties, and then they ship it back
Exactly.
to school districts, divide it up how
Mhm.
they see fit. So they
Exactly.
hold the purse string over and say, if you remove any book so let me play this out.
Mhm.
Crazy librarian gets a job. Not that all librarians are crazy, but let's just say
Right.
hypothetically, there's one that has an agenda, and we've seen them all across the country. So this is
Mhm.
not hypothetical. It's
Right.
actually happening. A radical librarian, school librarian,
Right.
acquires these books, genderqueer, All Boys Aren't Blue in elementary schools.
Mhm.
That author has come at us and said we were lying. And then we have proof that it's been found in elementary schools in Pennsylvania. So
Mhm.
this happens. These books do not belong with young children.
Correct.
But let's just say a librarian, a radical librarian with an agenda in a public school has acquired these books in her set of books at her library. Are you telling me a school district, a school board cannot vote to remove that book?
Well, if they do, they could risk losing funding. So that's, yeah. And most of the time, they're not going to do that. They're not going to risk that.
Yeah.
So
That really it takes away autonomy from local control of school
Mhm.
boards.
Mhm.
Parents have no say,
Mhm.
no path to file. I mean, I guess they could probably file complaints, but the board's not going to take action because they can't lose their funding.
Right.
Because as a board member, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your school district to make sure you have funding to run your
Right.
school districts.
Right.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
It's criminal.
And if you go and you look, I mean, so Destiny Discover, you can look up the vast majority of school districts have their catalogs out there. So you can go right now and look, folks, about what's in your school on this Destiny Discover tool. So, yeah. And what the books you're mentioning, and a lot of them are, like this book Sold is a very traumatic, terrible book. And those kind of books, they're in there. I mean, they're in a lot of the high schools, and they're very scary. Yeah.
Okay. Crazy law number 3. You got
Yeah.
another one you want to share?
Sure. So the other one that really bothers parents is the LGBTQ history is required to be taught, and you cannot opt out. That's the interesting thing about that is a lot of things you can opt out of. The radical sex ed we have, which is a whole nother story.
That's a whole episode
and
on
then
itself.
and yeah, right. And then there's some crazy survey type of things we have, but this LGBTQ history you can't opt out of. So
We
that
had
makes a problem
Sarah
for the
on a
parents.
couple weeks ago from
Yeah.
the state of Washington, and she was the first one. I'd never heard of it. That
Mhm.
she said, I think in their state they have to teach LGBTQ history, and I said, what? what's in LGBTQ history?
Right.
It just means that somebody from the LGBTQ community. You're going to study what they've done outside of being LGBTQ, I would guess. I don't know what that means exactly.
Well, the curriculum can vary by district, but it usually talks about the person being an activist and getting legislation made in order to, it could be many things, for their situation. But the problem that parents have with it is it requires you to talk about sexual materials outside of health class and outside of biological sex ed. And it becomes a less safe environment for those conversations. And, it's like seventh grade is pretty young to be talking about those kind of things, especially in a history class. So a lot of parents don't like that. So what they're doing, we help them. We're like, well, miss the day of school, I guess, ask for an alternative assignment. Some of the schools have given it, even though they're not supposed to, but some of the schools, they give a 0. It's unfortunate. Some of the parents have chosen to homeschool, because in Illinois, you can homeschool any subject you'd like anytime. Homeschool their child for history.
But that was under risk of threat recently too, the homeschooling, right?
Yeah.
I think so. A lot of times in blue states, WINs aren't actually getting bills across the finish line, like a parental bill of rights in Illinois. We're going to work on it. We're going to fight for it. But counting that as like, only if we get that as a win, you'll probably be pretty defeated. So what I've seen from our chapters in blue areas and blue states is if you stop terribly egregious bills, that's a win. That's a win in Moms for Liberty. So tell me a little bit about this homeschooling bill.
Sure. So recently there was a homeschool proposed bill, HB 2827, and it had some issues with it. And, the biggest thing is, so homeschoolers and a lot of these micro schools would have to register with the state and give a bunch of personal information about themselves and their family. Then the next point, they were going to have to, submit to potential audits periodically of what they're teaching, and the state was going to be able to give them requirements. Now, actually, there are already requirements, as there should be, of what certain subjects need to be taught to get high school diplomas and things. So that exists, and that's not changing. But the thing about this is that's crazy is the sell of the bill was supposed to be, well, we're going to protect children in this way because people will have to register for this, and we'll be able to get in there and see what they're doing if we need to. But think about that. I mean, how many people who are criminals or trying to hide their behavior are going to register on a form for homeschooling? Really? So this whole thing didn't make any sense. And the requirements they could have put in place, they could, it could be that the sex ed that the state is requiring could have to be taught to homeschoolers. Well, LGBTQ history could have to be taught to homeschoolers. I mean, because you start getting into that whole system, and a lot of the reasons why people are homeschooling is because they don't want to teach that to their children. So, and the absolutely crazy thing about it was they were going to have the public schools were going to be required to then set up systems, processes, policies, procedures, oversight, audit mechanisms to oversee all of this. And as you guys know, the public schools, the outcomes are just not good.
And in Illinois, they're
especially
very bad.
In Chicago area.
Chicago's are terrible.
They're quite bad. And the homeschooling outcomes are far better. So you're going to have this struggling, distracted public school system that you don't want to spend any more money on than you have to. Now required to spend money and set up things to oversee private and homeschoolers. It doesn't add up at all. No. It just doesn't add up. And then the whole idea is a lot of the unions would even say, hey, we don't want taxpayer money going towards private and homeschoolers. So I said, this doesn't make any sense, because now you're going to take more money.
Wasn't there a criminal component, a jail, a fine, something too?
Yeah.
What was that all about in the bill?
Yeah. So if they didn't submit the form, or they didn't, pass the audit, or these type of things, you could be charged. Yes. And that was, obviously ridiculous.
So egregious.
Right.
So egregious.
Absolutely.
So what's the status of that bill in Illinois?
Yeah. So now it's been sidelined. The legislative period is over.
It died. It's dead.
Well, it's dead for now. So we stay vigilant. We're always staying on alert, because things pop up next year. Things happen and they show up again. And one of the things that happens in Illinois, a lot is, and we have to watch for, is they'll have a shell bill that was meant for something else. And then these other bills will show up and they'll, rename the shell bill, and it'll kind of come in at the last minute.
Yeah.
So we
Or
really
it gets
have to
attached
watch.
to the train bill.
We have
And
to
yeah,
watch these
you have
things.
to be so vigilant.
Yes.
It happens at the federal level and at the state level. And so now I want to talk about Title IX.
Sure.
Because it's kind of ground zero. A lot of places seem to be ground zero right now in Title IX issues. But your county and the neighboring counties have some cases. I think there's been lawsuits filed now. But also Secretary McMahon, U.S. Secretary of Education, and U.S. Congresswoman Mary Miller, who is a good friend of Moms for Liberty from Illinois, had a conversation last week, I think, while Secretary McMahon was testifying on the Hill about some of the things going on with Title IX. And just a little plug here. Moms for Liberty is not celebrating Pride Month. We are celebrating Parental Rights Month. We're celebrating 100 years of the case Pierce versus Society of Sisters. It was out of Oregon. And this case was a group of nuns that wanted to teach in a Catholic school. The state of Oregon, along with the KKK was one of the huge proponents of this state ballot initiative that forced students to go to public school, and it passed in Oregon. And so it got, mediated through the courts, rose to the Supreme Court, and thank goodness the nuns won. And so it established parental rights. The justice said that children are not mere creatures of the state. And so it established parental rights as protected by law in the United States 100 years ago this month. And we celebrated that on the Supreme Court steps last week with Secretary McMahon and Congressman Mary Miller. They came and spoke also on behalf. But last week, I think it was literally an hour before our press conference, those two had this exchange, and we're going to roll that now if we can, please.
Madam Secretary, thank you for your recent response to my letters addressing Title IX violations in Dearborn and Naperville, Illinois. Could you please elaborate on what the Department of Education is doing to investigate similar violations in other school districts, and whether their federal funding will be rescinded for failing to comply with federal law?
Thank you very much. And we are indeed investigating many cases that come up under Title IX. I was informed, I think it was yesterday, that in Colorado there was as part of the public school system on school trips, that there were boys who were identifying as girls sleeping in the same bed with girls on these class trips, and parents were not even notified. I just think that that's incredibly wrong. That is a Title IX violation that we'll be investigating. There is I think there's in Wyoming a college, that had, again, boys joining girls' sororities. Again, Title IX violations. We are going to investigate them, and we will look at whatever options, that we have available, whether it is defunding some of those programs. So, yes.
Crazy, the Title IX violations going on in our country right now. And just to recap, those that are watching and maybe haven't been following this story for the past year or the past couple of years, Title IX was established in 1973 or 79. Now I think 73. But it was established in the 70s to protect women's spaces in sports and locker rooms and restrooms, so that women had an equal opportunity to compete in their own with their own gender, their own sex. And it's been standing since the 70s. It's given women amazing opportunities to compete and excel and earn scholarships and change the path for a lot of women in sports. And, you opened this whole discussion about how you were trained young to be an athlete and on a team. And so it's probably a little bit deeply personal to you too. Last year, the Biden administration decided through their Department of Education that they were going to rewrite Title IX. It went from a small little handful of pages to hundreds of pages. And the gist of it is, for those that don't want to go read it, is they infuse gender ideology through Title IX, which pretty much just decimates Title IX. It now says if you identify as a girl, you can play in the sports, you can use the restroom, the locker room. anyone that identifies. So a man or a boy that identifies as a girl. And that's why we're seeing all these crazy stories across the country. Some people are still struggling to believe they're true. It is absolutely true what's happening. You just heard Secretary McMahon talking about it, and Congresswoman Mary Miller. And we're going to talk now about a member of your chapter that has been in national news for the last couple months about what's been going on with her daughter right there in your county. And so can you share that story with us?
Sure. So a member of our chapter, Nicole Gorgas, she's in Deerfield, and ironically, she had reached out to us about a different issue about 2 years ago that was not related to this recent one. So, we had been connected. And then, so it was in March, she reaches out and messages the chapter, something's going on with the 7th grade girls, so I call her, like, okay, what's going on? And so she tells me her daughter and the gym class, there's a boy in the locker room, okay, changing with them. And I mean, this was fresh. This was probably like a day or two after it happened originally.
So 7th grade, 12 years old or so probably.
Like, yes, 12, 13 years old. And so I'm getting the understanding of the story. And this is right before I came to Texas for Moms for Liberty. And I know I talked about it there because it was really fresh. And the girls, the first solution was they weren't going to, and the first time I talked to her, it was the girls had decided it was smart. They just weren't going to change to avoid the entire situation, try to diffuse the situation. That's pretty, in my opinion, that's pretty mature. And I guess the gym teachers were okay with that. So this was the first day or two.
It's also, I mean, I was a 12-year-old girl. You were a 12-year-old girl. And I think how much I wanted to hide my body then, and how I definitely didn't want a boy see me changing, or even another girl. Honestly, I mean, some girls I think were a little bit more free and comfortable, but most of the girls I knew, I mean, we all were very, if you had to change for gym, you're kind of in your little area, you're protecting your body because your body's changing, and it's weird even to you. It's normal and it's healthy, but it's also awkward and uncomfortable. And so I believe, actually, side story, I went to school right here growing up, and I remember, now it's coming back to me, middle school, and I refused to dress out because I didn't even want to really change around the girls. And I remember coach getting so mad at me one time. I walked out in the locker room in my regular clothes, and he's like, "Why won't you change?" And I just was trying, I felt so awkward and uncomfortable. I cannot imagine if a boy was in there too. And so it seems like a normal response to me. And the girls, sounds like they got together and they were like, look, let's just not change. Let's just see if we can get through this. And so you're saying at first the school said, okay, we get it. We understand.
Well, the teachers were fine with that. It seems like, and I know a lot of schools don't require that the kids change. It's just more comfortable. You don't want to sweat in your other clothes. I mean, I get it, and I even had swimming in high school. So I remember it being really uncomfortable too, like you said, because, we'd have to change and then we'd have to get ready and whatever. So, And so then things changed though. And they, let's also clarify that the girls were told you can go down the hall to this single use restroom or something to change that they had already built to accommodate situations like this or other situations. And the girls, I guess, were like, well, why should I have to go down there? Why doesn't the boy go down there? Why is he in our room? Because now, and they said, no, we can't make him leave because, he's a girl. And then they were talking about, the misgendering and this kind of thing. So it got, super uncomfortable quickly. And then they reprimanded the girls. We have through a FOIA that we'll be releasing. They reprimanded the girls for not changing, and they were making them change. So got very, very uncomfortable.
The teachers were making the girls change in front of a boy. What is that?
Well, my understanding is the teachers had wanted to diffuse the situation and let the girls not change. But then somewhere else in the administration, they decided that wasn't workable and they were going to need to change. That has since also changed. There's some of the girls are not changing, and now the school's out, but for the rest of the year, they let them not change. But some of the girls did acquiesce changing in there. And
they told him you must change for gym, and the boy is staying in there that identifies as a
Yeah.
girl, and he's going to change too.
He's gonna
and you
change
have
too.
to do this, or what? There's going to be punishment.
Well, I don't know the exact punishments, but
Okay.
yes, we have a FOIA that says that there's going to be situation. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that get
Yep.
released.
I'll
for
post
sure.
it. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll post it soon.
That's crazy. And so I've talked to Nicole. We had her on a call the other night, and she was telling some of the story, and it really doesn't end there. I think her daughter is there's still things happening, or there was before school got out.
Yeah.
What else was going on?
Yeah. So her daughter had experienced some bullying in the lunchroom. Now, I don't know if that's related for sure or not to the other situation.
Because she's speaking up, because she is
probably
pushing back.
Yeah,
100%.
probably. And, it's just, yeah. So, and I guess they have a resource officer, and the resource officer handled it reasonably well. And there, some changes were made, but it's just unfortunate, and I think that a lot of parents in my area and Nicole's area feel like, we send our kids to these schools and we tell our kids to respect the staff and the teachers, but then, they're not respected back.
I remember what Nicole said. She said the district, remember the district administrator was driving from the school district over enforcing the changing. That's what Nicole said on the call the other night. The teachers did not want to enforce.
Right.
And because that they were being so lenient and allowing the girls to not change, the district administrator was heavy-handed. And she multiple times drove over to the school to make sure the girls were changing. That's what she said the other night on the call.
Yeah. So also on the FOIA, you can tell that there's an organized effort to make sure that somebody is there to, enforce and monitor the changing situation. And to be fair, they are offering the girls to go down the hall to the other bathroom, but they were like, why do I need, the girls, why do I need to do this? That's not fair. So yeah, it's so egregious. I mean, and so we'll release the FOIA. And
good. Good. Give us the information. Let us push it out. And we're lucky to have, we're blessed to have Representative like Mary Miller, Congresswoman, and Linda McMahon, like that beast of the U.S. Department of Education up there doing the work that needs to be done. Okay. So we're going to start wrapping this up now. I think people got a pretty good idea of how crazy it is in Illinois. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I don't know, like what's it like for you to be chapter chair in this movement? Maybe some points of help, some ideas, suggestions for people that want to be active, either in your chapter or in the state of Illinois or somewhere else, anywhere else. This is hard work for you. You just keep getting like beat back down, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it joyfully. So any points of any help for those women out there or men that want to stand up?
Yeah. And it can be men. And, we always talk about Moms for Liberty isn't just for moms. It's just because of how it started.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dads certainly doing great work as well. I always think people can contribute in their own way. Some people will go talk to a school board, but some people, they just want to, some people have a big following on social media. So they post things and it reaches their friends that maybe they don't get to talk to about these issues. And then they're like, wow, I didn't know in X school this happened, supporting your friends, even the phone call, Nicole and these other parents, there's several of them in that district that haven't spoken out too. They appreciate the support because the girls feel alone sometimes. So that can be helpful too. It's getting involved in a chapter. If you don't have a chapter, at least follow us nationally, sign up. It's free. There's a ton of resources, and get the word out. And you don't, if you want to start a chapter, we got a lot of counties in Illinois. So thank you. And I'm happy to help you get started. But I think use your networks too. And, these kind of events and things we do are a lot of fun. I mean, I have met some of the best friends of my life doing this work. And we have a lot of fun, and we do other kinds of outings. And yeah, sure, we talk about these activities, but we don't just go beat the barrel every day. We have a good time together too. So
yeah, everyone within Moms for Liberty says they found their people, they found their tribe. And I think you were saying that school board meeting with Nicole when she had to go speak up about what was happening in the locker room and the changing. Verge, who is a dad of he's a chapter chair. I think we have 6 chapter chairs that are dads. Verge stepped up and 3 hours away. He's a chapter in another county.
4-ish hours. And he
gathered up his members and they drove down to support you because you said you were way outnumbered in that meeting. So
Yeah, so there was a lot of activists from the other side that brought in people, and there was very few from the local area and brought in. And that's not something like we necessarily do. We really like them to be the local parents, but in this case, it was great that Verge had brought some people in, and there were people from other areas. They were so upset about what was going on, and I think you'd see that also. There was a big Naperville school board meeting that's not in my county, but the next county over, and there was a lot of uproar about the boys and the girls track and sports.
Yeah, that was
Yes,
a big
and that was a
case
big
too.
case. Yeah, we have a lot of that going on, and these are all standard policies in Illinois. The boys and the girls sports, the Illinois Athletic Association for the high schools and the elementary schools are following the state law, and they're enforcing all of this. So it's a really tough environment. Yeah.
So why do you keep going? What's your
Yeah.
why?
My why is that if I can help or save one child and make their life better, it's worth it to me. I mean, I always think of that at the end of the day, what really matters is the next generation and preserving our the United States liberties and having the kids happy and seeing them thrive. They shouldn't have to be dealing with these issues. Let the parents and the administrators plow through and solve this for them. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's an excellent why. We're
Yeah.
grateful for you. We're grateful for
Sure.
your leadership in Illinois and in your county, the work that you're doing, that you're so vocal and still standing. We're grateful to have had you today on the Fire of
Sure.
Liberty show. We're going to close out here and ask you to follow us on Apple or Spotify. Comment, give us 5 stars. We are on iHeartRadio. You can find us on YouTube and Rumble. And we hope that you will join Moms for Liberty, momsforliberty.org, support our organization. We are funded by grassroots people. We've been accused for a long time of having all kinds of massive dark money. And then our 990 started coming out and people were realizing, oh, maybe there isn't just a ton of billionaires behind them. And so we need support from people like you to keep going. And we've got some big things coming up. We are going to keep fighting like heck with a smile on our faces.
Yeah.
And we hope you'll join us next week at 10 a.m., same time, same place. Thank you.